Welcome to One Shot on Frame. I'm Jason Davis. This episode is Alexi Lalas. You know him from the 1994 World Cup team and being a pop culture phenomenon in the 90s. You know him from television, where he works for Fox Sports these days, and from social media, where he likes to rile people up. We talk about Alexi's journey from Michigan to Rutgers to the U.S. men's national team, his life as a television personality, and so many more things on this episode. Thanks to Alexi for coming by. Thanks to you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and like the video. Get ready for more from One Shot on Frame. All right. I mean, there's nowhere to start but with the story of this photo. Now, I should tell people, since we're beginning here, that you sent me two different photos. Mm-hmm. One of them was of a much younger Alexi Lalas, a soccer photo. You were a little kid taking your obligatory kneeling soccer photo for your parents, right, to put up on the refrigerator or whatever. But I chose this one. I actually said, I want this Alexi Lalas. What's happening in this photo, Alexi?
Yeah, so the photo that I did send you, or one of the photos that we're not using, obviously was kind of a more traditional youth soccer thing. And, you know, I didn't know how much soccer you wanted to get into in all of this. And so I gave you a couple to choose from here. This one, for those that are listening and or watching, well, if you're just listening, then this one I think is just kind of the epitome of me in high school. This would have been the late 80s in high school outside of Detroit, where I grew up. And, this is me in all my 80s glory, if you will. All right. So we got a lot going on here. Okay.
There's a lot going on.
We got, the obligatory mullet going on. We have a, Stonewashed denim jean jacket that has a story of its own. I'll get into that in a second.
The stonewashed element is the best part of that jacket, for sure.
And then, while not necessarily in the last row, I seem to have just overtaken the corner of the classroom. By the way, this is a picture of me in an actual class. Can't tell you which class it was. But while I'm not in the last row, I'm actually leaning to the back in the back row. So nobody is taking that last seat behind me. So I get to survey everything ahead of me. But this is kind of the last row type of defense that I had.
You were a back of the room kid.
I was a back of the room kid. I was not the best of students. I wasn't horrible, but I was not the best of students. I had my moments. My mom was a writer. My dad was a professor, and the gene in this case fell far, far, far from the tree.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily entirely true based on what I know of you. But I do want to come back to that. So you said this is, basically last row. This is some class. You don't know what class. I see a brick wall, painted brick wall behind you. So we're not talking about, where is this? A dungeon class somewhere?
Yeah, this was probably one of, I was not in, how should we say, the advanced courses. And so if and when that came about, you were oftentimes kind of sequestered away in the literally lower parts of the campus and stuff like that. But, I also have this kind of, moronic high school facial expression there, Bill and Ted-esque, or
there is some of that,
16 Candles-ish type of thing going on here, thinking that you're really, really cool and realizing much after the fact that you aren't, but just trying to figure your way through all this kind of stuff, which is, part of what the appearance was and the aesthetic and all that.
Yeah. Now that you say it, Anthony Michael Hall, right? Just a lot bigger version of Anthony Michael Hall.
I tell you what, Jason, I have a 14-year-old son and a 17-year-old boy, and my 14-year-old son, they all have this kind of crazy poof that they do with their hair now in front.
Okay.
And I have a picture side by side with him and a 1980s picture of Anthony Michael Hall, and it is uncanny how much he looks like him. Now, back in the day, you would never ever have wanted to have associated yourself with him because he played, kind of the dorky type and the nerdy type, but nowadays evidently that's what they're going for. That's what the kids are doing.
I'm sure there's a portion of the audience for this show who are going to like, who the hell is Anthony Michael Hall? But
It's okay.
do
Every
your
generation
research.
has its, Urkel, or every decade has those kind of kids that are dorky, but they're also very, very cool in their own way.
He grew up and was he's
Yeah.
a reasonably good looking guy. Had a career as an adult. I remember watching a show where he had like some sort of psychic powers or something, and he's been around.
Yeah,
he's done some
I
stuff.
mean, he's been around. He still does stuff. But back in the '80s, he was when coming on with 16 Candles and all the
Pretty
all the
in
different
Pink.
Pretty in Pink. No, I was Anthony Michael Hall Pretty in Pink.
No, he wasn't.
Would have been.
He wasn't.
Well, obviously Molly Ringwald.
Sure.
And Andrew McCarthy. There you go, Andrew McCarthy, and who's the guy that? Anyway, the list goes on and on.
Guy who played Ducky.
Oh, yeah, John Cryer. Yes, exactly.
John Cryer. Right.
There you go. Yeah. You might know him if you're a little younger from what is it? Two Men and a Baby, or Two Men and a Kid, or whatever that is.
Two and a Half Men.
There you go. 2.5 Men.
I want to know.
God, we are all over the map.
I want to know why this photo was taken. Like, who took this photo, Alexi? Do you know?
I wish I knew where and what the context was. But, also part of me just kind of looks at it as, a literal snapshot of who I was at that time. And obviously looking back now as a 52-year-old man, and all of the different twists and turns and ups and downs that I have taken since that picture, and what I would have said to this this young man at the time, and while it worked out, you were still trying to figure out what you were doing. I remember the jean jacket that I bought is just your typical traditional type of Levi's jean jacket, but I took it and I wanted it stonewashed, which was a big thing back then for those that don't remember or were not there. And so I had to do it myself. And I'll never forget buying bleach and putting it into a bucket and tying the jean jacket together. And somebody had told me this would work. And then you put it into the bleach and you let it sit forever. And so not all the bleach gets onto the areas, and that's where you get kind of that stonewash type of feel. It actually worked out okay. And I still have that jacket to this day. Yep. Wow. I still have that jacket to this day.
Yeah, that's how tie-dye works. I've never really done it myself, but I'm pretty sure that's how tie-dye works.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same concept same concept. I bought it for $20. I'll never forget.
Wow. Which is like $700 in today's money. So
exactly.
That's exactly what that is. So this late 80s, obviously high school Alexi Lalas, you're 5-6 years away from playing in a World Cup at this point, right? You're not yet at Rutgers, obviously, but you're
right.
I'm curious at that point, sort of, who was Alexi Lalas beyond a reasonable student?
Sure. Yeah. So I was a reasonable student. I was a good athlete, playing both hockey and soccer. I think at this point really kind of channeled things towards soccer and recognized that I wanted to continue to play soccer. Now, having said that, I did not have a tremendous amount of opportunities coming out. It was a very different time, and I was coming from a very different place. We didn't have YouTube or the kind of structure that recruits players now. We certainly didn't have the pathways that players have. And so I wanted to try to play Division I soccer. And about this time, I would have been, probably applying to schools, and I got rejected everywhere. And so soccer, even though I was, an all-state type of player and had done some things, I was still coming from Michigan. And I remember getting rejected at every single place that I applied. And on the bottom of my applications was a application to Rutgers University. And the only reason that I had gotten it was because that I had read in Soccer America, the Bible back then, which is an actual magazine, for those that don't know, and it would go through all the soccer things. And I had read an article on Peter Vermes, who was at Rutgers, and it was on the back page. I'll never forget reading it, and I didn't know where Rutgers was. I didn't know anything about it, but I ended up getting a application. And so I applied, and my father called, and it would have been right around this time. I can vividly see in this picture, it's just around that time. My father called up and said, "Hey, I got this kid, and he's done X and Y and Z, and he's an okay student." And we drove the 16 hours out that weekend to meet with Bob Riasso, the head coach of Rutgers University. And he said, "Look, I can invite you to preseason and I can get you into the agriculture school. And like I said, I got rejected at so many different places. I would have taken anything, and I took it right on the spot. I said, that's fine. Like I said, I had never been to exit 9 off the turnpike, Rutgers University, let alone to New Jersey. I did it completely wrong. If you're listening right now, you're going through this. This is not how you're supposed to kind of pick and choose your school if you are in a position to be able to do that. But it all worked out. The soccer gods smiled upon me, and it all worked out. But I would have been thinking at this point, what am I doing after, here in the next 2 years when I leave for college, and where is that going to be? Am I going to go to college? Is anybody, am I going to be able to continue to play soccer and do all those things? But as far as like you said, would have been 6 years later, the concept of playing in a World Cup, that could not have been further from my mind. Not because it wouldn't be a dream or something like that, but just I could not see any connection, and I could not see any end game of that ever happening in my 1986-ish type of brain in that moment.
You weren't on a pathway. There was a jungle, and you had to get your machete out, and you had to chop your own way through that jungle.
Yeah.
So the part about okay, so what I'm getting from this is that this is how important soccer was to you, that you just wanted an opportunity to play at the college level, which is, the only sort of next level for a kid of your age at the time. What did your parents think of that? What did your parents think of you prioritizing soccer when your education is probably first for them?
Yeah, so, as I said, my mom was a writer and my dad was a professor, and so it was very academic in my house in that they stressed this was something that you needed to do. And so I had no real connection with either of them through sports. Now, that can be a bad thing, but it actually was a good thing in that it was something that I owned. It was all me. They also were incredibly supportive of it because, they saw that I was good. They also saw that it kept me out of trouble. And that was an important thing. And so they were, like I said, they encouraged me, and they gave me as many opportunities as I could possibly get in the, as you mentioned, the time frame that we're talking about here. And it's a completely different world than what we're talking about now. And so I thought about soccer as just something that I loved to do, and I thought about possibly, if I was going to go to college, if I could possibly get to a place where I was playing in Division I soccer. And even though I got rejected at all those different places, from a soccer perspective, Rutgers ended up being the best place because it was the best. Quality. It's in the hotbed of a soccer area, a traditional soccer area. So I was playing with and against some of the great players of the day. And they were going through that transition period where they needed players. And on that trip, that recruiting trip, if you will, where we drove the 16 hours out and 16 hours back, I also told the coach, yeah, I've played defense, because I knew that they were going through a transitional period. And I completely lied and told them, yeah. And I ended up starting that year as a sweeper. And I was making it up as I went along. So, yeah, I guess fake it till you make it.
So the Alexi Lalas in this photo was not a dominant physical center back Alexi Lalas?
No, I had carte blanche to basically go anywhere at that point, whether I was playing for my high school. And back then we did both. We played for our high school and I played for a travel team, I guess it would be called back then. But I was much more of a free roaming midfielder, kind of going wherever I wanted. But I was never going to come back and play defense. And so I ended up, a few years later, showing up at Rutgers University, and like I said, they invited me to preseason. They got me into the agriculture school, and while I grew up in Michigan, I did not grow up on a farm. I took beef and sheep production. I swear to God, because I had to, get the credits in order to play. And I didn't say a word for the first month that I was there. I scared the crap out of everybody because these were all Jersey kids. And they looked at the kid from Michigan as like, that's the other side of the moon. They were like, oh my God, I don't even know where Michigan is. So it actually worked in my advantage. And then I just kicked everything that moved. And back then you could literally, if there wasn't protruding bone, then as I play on, you'll be okay. So you could take a yellow every single game. It was just mayhem out there. And I liked the physical part of it. And I just kind of grew into the position of sweeping, and it worked out all right.